Hey everybody, this is Minion Soldier, and this is Ship Updates with a touch of the piracy show thrown in. And today's show, we actually did get some ship updates. There was some, some interesting stuff, of course, having to do with this ship. The Eclipse, which is, of course, the Age of Stealth bomber that was sold almost a year ago, is now entering final art. So hopefully at some point in the near future, we'll get our hands on it. Probably not June, probably more like September, just being conservative. But yeah, I mean, who knows? They could finish it sooner. I mean, it is in final art now, so June, it may be when we get it. I don't think it'll make 3.1, but probably the next patch. And then there was this other little thing that kind of hopped out during ATV. You may remember this entirely, forgettable ship. No big deal. It was this thing called the Hammerhead thing. No one really cared about it. Not really a big deal. And CIG just announced that it's actually in full production right now. Yes, the Hammerhead is officially in full production. Of course, when we originally saw the sale, they're saying it's moving into the production pipeline. And now it is apparently in full production. So I think that this is as good a time as any to start doing what I love to do the most, which is speculating. So let's get started. Oh, and by the way, the footage in the background is, no big deal. Once again, just me crossing a million UEC on the Caterpillar. But yes, the Hammerhead in full production. What does it mean? What can we expect? Where is this? When can we possibly see this ship? Well, we can use other ships to kind of define what might happen around the Hammerhead. Now, let's use the Reclaimer as an example. Now, the Reclaimer, of course, began its production run at about this time last year. The Reclaimer's production run ended in September of last year. So technically, the actual production of a working ship, a basic working ship, as far as we know, ended back in September. And that was the Reclaimer, a ship that is much larger and much more, I would say, complex than the Hammerhead. Now, of course, part of the Reclaimer is the salvage system, that which, of course, requires developer time to bring to life, which is one of the reasons why it might be a while yet till we see the Reclaimer in the game. That is something that is holding it back. But the Hammerhead really doesn't need any of those systems. It is a basic combat vessel. It flies around. It shoots stuff. It doesn't have any real tricks up its sleeve. It's basically guns, engines, shields, and fun in one package. As impressive a ship as it is, it really doesn't require any great leaps past the technology that we already have, and arguably to a certain degree already have working in the game. There's nothing else beyond that. Landing on a landing pad, been there, done that. Shoot things from turrets. Been there, done that. Shoot things with guns. Yeah. Missiles. Yeah. Check. Do shields work? Shields work. Do engines work? Engines work. There's nothing really holding the ship back. There's no, mystical system like salvage or anything like that that needs to be invented for this thing to work. Everything that the entire foundation this vessel needs to work is already here. Now, of course, there are added layers of complexity with the module and the component system and all of that, but those are systems that universally affect all ships, and there's nothing within that precludes the ship from working in the game. So, given what we've already seen and what we're about to see, it's reasonable to assume that Foundry 42 in the UK can probably crank this ship out fairly quickly. So there is an argument to say that it's possible that you could be flying it before the end of the year. Now, let's take the opposite side and let's argue against that, and think of some reasons why we may not see the Hammerhead this year. Let's be fair. Now, there are other large ships like the Javelin and the Idris, which have seemingly at different times appeared to be close to finished, but have never really materialized. Now, there's a couple of reasons that they could be getting held back. One, Squadron 42, kind of obvious, and the other one is that basically the game just isn't ready for them. There's a lot of optimization and a lot of work that needs to go into making ships that are more or less the equivalent of flying space stations. And if you've loaded into 3.0 PTU, you know how just loading into these things can really bog your PC down. Well, imagine imagine having a bunch of them flying around in that same system. It could have some catastrophic effects on your PC. That might be one reason as well why these things are kind of being held back, and not so much, just finished and just sitting on a shelf and saying not yet, but they may be at a point where they're saying, the game just isn't ready to handle them, so there's no real big rush. As long as they work for what Squadron 42 needs, that's good enough for now, and then we'll come back and we'll finesse them a little bit later and then put them into Star Citizen. That could very much be it. And, the reason why this ship is kind of leapfrogging ahead of the Polaris might be the fact that maybe they need it for Squadron 42. Maybe there's some kind of critical role that it can fit into in Squadron 42. That means that, they've kind of had to push it to the front of the line. Other ships have done this in the past. It doesn't necessarily mean that they would then just immediately drop the ship into Star Citizen and say, have fun. You have to also think that, the impact that this ship could have on the PTU, not just in terms of performance, but in terms of gameplay, could have some consequences. I mean, we're getting into a point where they're working in developing salvage and mining to deliver those and the ships along with them that go with those mechanics. There may not be enough free hands to also develop some content geared towards much larger combat-oriented vessels. Now, I'm sure there's a lot of people who own the ship who would immediately say, I don't care. I just want the ship. I just want to fly the ship, dude. Just let me fly the ship. Do the guns work? Yeah. Do the engines work? Yeah. Do the shields work? Yeah, fine. Just let me fly it. I just want to fly my ship. And that, it seems like a reasonable thing to say. We've had ships where the functionality isn't fully in place. In fact, all of them. And, they've been put into the game. But having a large combat-oriented ship, some devs might say, you know what? They're probably going to fly around with it and just be like, ooh, look at this, look at that, look at the other thing. But after a while, they're going to be like, I want to test this ship out. And if there aren't really, missions and content geared towards these things, they might start looking to create their own content at the expense of other players. And so suddenly unleashing this ship into the PU could have some gameplay consequences for the non-combat oriented players. I'm just playing devil's advocate here. I'm sure there are people who will be like, oh no, I would never do that to another player. Perish the thought. But I know that there are other players who would be like, yes, please, can we? Now, of course, the other side of that is, and yes, I just crossed $1 million in UEC. The other side of that argument is, of course, that if you take a ship like the Hammerhead and then you kind of put it out there in front of everybody, we're working on it, we're building it, here's a whole bunch of videos of it coming to life, and here it is, it's done, and then you kind of hold it back, the Hammerhead's kind of got a lot of fans. There's I think that there's just a little tiny bit of enthusiasm for the ship within the community. And so, kind of holding it back, might have some consequences as well. Now, there is some content which could be modified to account for the Hammerhead. certainly the interdiction sites that are currently in game. I mean, if you've actually taken the time to kind of fight the enemies that are at them, you'll find pirate caterpillars, which actually drop cargo in space. There are pirate constellations there, and there are pirate fighters. So there are enemies to fight, and certainly with added ships coming into the game, that could serve as some very beginner level content for the Hammerhead and something to kind of help people get used to the ship and get used to its performance and kind of develop themselves and their tactics and their skills for a while before things really heat up. So I'm sure that to once again flip the coin, it probably wouldn't be too difficult to implement something like that, though just expanding from the current system for interdiction and the little zones that it creates. But I wouldn't want to give that answer for a developer. I think they probably know a lot better about how much resources, time, and effort it would take to kind of make those changes. So I'd say I would say maybe it's possible, but I wouldn't say, oh yeah, they could totally do it within a week. I don't know what the big deal is, because I don't know. But I think that definitely to unleash a ship like that into the PU without something for it to do, players would very rapidly turn on each other and start marauding with this. And when you have new ships like salvagers and miners and whatnot going out, and Hull C's possibly breaking into the PU, it could be very much Armageddon-esque for the first little while. Now, overall, I think that I've presented, some arguments why we may see it within the year. I think some fair ones. I think I presented some arguments why not. Some of the concerns that developers might have, or there might be some unforeseen issues within the game itself that take priority and push this ship back. So I think I've been kind of fair in presenting reasons why and reasons why not. My only misgivings about this, my only real misgivings, would be that depending on the actual sales numbers of the ship, how many of these were sold versus other ships like, say, the Polaris, there may be some people who don't own this but own the Polaris who might start to kind of be like, why is this ship jumping all the way ahead of not only ships like the Endeavour and the Genesis Starliner? Yes, they were meant for post-release, but why is it leapfrogging so many other ships? Why does this thing move up to the front of the line, and why not, my Polaris or blah, blah, blah? I mean, I think that a ship like this probably, in the end, the reason why they want to get it out there is it is that bridging combat ship between the capitals and the smaller ships, the ships that go from, say, fighters to gunships to Connies. It is that kind of in the that middle of the road kind of combat vessel that a lot of people have wanted for a long time, and other people have advocated for in one way or another, myself included. And CIG sees a ship like this and says, a lot of these systems already exist in game. A lot of these systems are already proven to a certain degree. So it's something that we can do relatively quickly. Using the Reclaimer as an example, it's something that we could probably get done within the year, but there's no real, there's no overhanging system like salvage or mining that could possibly hold it back. So this is something that, there's probably a lot of people that own this ship. It has a lot of broad appeal to a lot of different careers, not only as a defensive vessel, but potentially an offensive vessel. There's a lot of people who were fully on board for this thing, and so CIG is probably looking at it and saying, this would be a really great way to kind of get, some real serious goodwill with the community by getting a ship like this out there and in their hands. Maybe you want to hold back on the Idris and the Javelin for Squadron 42, but this is something that we can put out there now. So I'm going to end it off with basically a guesstimate. I'm going to kind of throw some ideas out there. I think honestly, reasonable best case scenario for this ship, Christmas 2018. I think reasonable best case scenario. Worst case scenario, let's, because you have to remember, there are ships like the Carrack, there are ships like the Banu Merchantman being worked on, the Hull C. There are other things that may complicate things. There may be some complications with the Reclaimer in the future that, they need to take resources and put them back into this. And it wouldn't be the first time that a ship in production has been shelved temporarily to allow another ship to be finished. I mean, the Cutlass Red and the Cutlass Blue were well along, and then, boom, they stopped, and all of a sudden we're doing the Connie Phoenix for one reason or another. So, worst case scenario, a year and a half from now. I think that would be fair. Now, some people might not be satisfied by Christmas 2018. You never know. If Chris Roberts is basically standing behind the artist's head with a gun to his head, and he's saying, I need this ship now, I need this ship now, I need this ship now, maybe the September, October release, but I would never put money on that, not even $1. So that's my guesstimate of when we could possibly expect the Hammerhead. So expect me to come back to this video at some point in the future and either laugh at my guesstimate or, just, I figured that one out. But anyways, Hammerhead on the way. Super cool. Let's see what kind of havoc, hopefully in the near future, that this thing can create. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoyed the video, and thanks for watching.